Hey everyone, welcome Jen Wydro.
Yeah.
We are going to talk to Jen about her wealth of knowledge about nutrition and holistic wellness in general. Just chatting about some really interesting gene mutations and how to work with them. Um, but why don't we start with like when I met you? When was that?
2006.
Was it that long ago? Yeah, 2005, 2006. Yeah.
Mhm.
And what your lifestyle was like, your eating habits, and what the process was like to start moving in the direction towards where you are now.
Wow, what a long journey it's been between then and now. Probably a 180 in my diet, I would say. When I met you, we were working in the restaurant industry, and I was in graduate school. So I was working about 40 hours a week in full-time graduate school in a doctoral program for psychology. And steeped in the restaurant culture, which is one of sort of, I would eat the restaurant food, and it was frequently something to have drinks after work. And I was newly married as well. And so just sort of a young adult, freshly on the West Coast, really busy, not making a lot of time for food. And quite honestly, not having a lot of interest in food and cooking and never having a background in it. So, I it's funny, as I slowly, after graduating with my doctorate in psychology, having time to start paying attention to what I put into my body, sort of the start of the process of deciding how to more mindfully eat.
Hmm. And what were those first steps like? What was the first big realization? Like, oh, maybe I should be thinking differently about this, and what sort of influences in your life led to that?
Yeah, I mean, so right after I graduated, I was also going through a divorce. So I sort of twofold found myself with a lot of extra time. My dissertation was completed. Um, and, moving through this divorce, I found that I was looking to food and alcohol for comfort, and what that really led to was gaining weight.
Mm-hmm.
And as many of us women know, that it was one day just sort of getting on the scale and being like, okay, I need to make some changes and start looking at what I'm doing, because I want to be healthy, and I don't know actually how to do that.
Right.
And sort of having that realization um, that I needed to start figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about what your basic your basic foundation of like what drives what you now know to be a healthy diet? What I know you're constantly experimenting and adding, subtracting, and researching, but can you give us a rundown of what that means? I know that you're pescatarian, so and I'm not sure how much of that is related or like a moral choice.
Yeah. I would say right now the pescatarianism is a habit. I'm actually considering sort of moving more towards experimenting with meat and eating it. I always have believed that it's a healthy lifestyle. I think that like the whole animal eating is extremely grounded. And I would sort of say, to answer your question, that's my basic foundation. I find a lot of both spiritual and just practical grounding in ancestral wisdom when it comes to nutrition. Many of the practices that are becoming repopularized are things that we've known as humans for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And incorporating those into my daily life, incorporating the seasons into my seasonal life, are things that I've found just profoundly impactful in adding meaning, both daily, seasonally, annually, monthly with the moon. I mean, I just find it grounding and moving towards health in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So before we started recording this, you were talking about some of the gene mutations that you just started paying attention to after getting your genome mapped, and some nutritional counseling based on that. Can you go through some of that just one more time, maybe quickly?
Sure. Yeah. And wow, even since I've been paying attention to the nutrition world and the holistic nutrition world, the genetics component has just grown, I think, and blossomed so much. It's such a new component for us to understand. But to back up before, what I was talking to you about was just recently learning I have a very common SNP, or a mutation on the MTHFR gene, which has to do with methylation. And prior to that, just after graduating with my holistic nutrition degree, I learned that I have the BRCA2 mutation, which means I'm prone to breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So it's interesting to allow that knowledge to be, I kind of consider it I'm so grateful to have that knowledge, because it allows me to make, it's sort of the kick in the pants, I guess, to make those decisions that aren't always easy to make, and to continue to develop healthy lifestyle practices that in truth would be healthy for probably most anyone. And it's just a little extra motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when that information came through, it was quite a shocker.
It really was.
In the pants for me too, because I mean, who knows? I haven't done the genome thing, so anyone can have this. Do you know the percentage of women who have this?
Interesting. I don't know the percentages of women who have the BRCA mutations. I will put out a disclaimer, because 23andMe is where many people are getting their genetic information from currently. And they've just recently, like about a month ago, started providing BRCA mutation information. And I think it's really important for people to know that it is not comprehensive. So 23andMe tells me that I'm negative in the BRCA2 mutation. So they're testing very specific different SNPs that don't cover the ones that increase our genetic risk. So I think that's going to lead to a lot of false negatives and confusion. Yeah.
So how did you find out?
I found out because of family history. The doctor was willing to specifically test me through my insurance. At this point, the way insurance companies generally work is you have to have a pretty high indication that you may have the gene for them to cover the tests. Yeah, but my mom did get cancer when she was 35, and it was at age 35 that I learned that I also had the mutation. Yeah, so it felt like a life or death sort of impact, as far as needing to make some pretty intense changes.
Yeah, and you were already, and at that point when you found that out, you were already eating super healthy and really fit. What were the changes that you made at that point, finding out that information?
Yeah, wow. And I just feel so grateful that I had the information that I did at the time I learned that information about the mutation, because I literally received an email with the information that I had the BRCA2 gene while I was traveling in Australia. When I got home a week or two later, the voicemail on my phone was from my doctors to schedule a double mastectomy.
Oh my gosh.
So the doctors immediately wanted to have a double mastectomy and an ovarectomy, remove my ovaries.
That's crazy.
And that was just they maintain still that as their recommendation to me. And it is extremely difficult to do things to go against what your doctors recommend and say is the standard of care. And without that basic nutritional information and knowledge, I wouldn't have had the strength and the grounding to make my own decisions and have confidence that I was actually making the best decision I could for my health. Yeah.
Yeah. So what changes did you make then?
Oh, yes. The number one thing that I implemented actually immediately, like while I was still in Australia, was no white sugar and no white flour. So I just kind of knew that was the basic place to start. We know that cancer feeds off of sugar, including carbohydrates, alcohol, right? So those were my friend I was traveling with still laughs at me because my actual first reaction was to rebel and eat a chocolate chip cookie. It's like, oh, it really went off the rails because I really wasn't eating many sweets already. And then pretty much the next day started to just completely cut out all white sugar and flour. Yeah. And then that led to then cutting out wheat altogether. Really dramatically reducing my alcohol to almost zero, which all of these things are things I'm still learning moderation on. And so, to me, it sort of had to be a first cut everything out before learning in what way moderation could be used to introduce it. So those were the main ones: wheat, sugar, and alcohol. And then introducing potent anti-cancer agents into my daily practice. So things like broccoli sprouts, sulforaphane, tons of antioxidants, and then sort of daily detoxification practices that are.
What does that entail?
A lot of them can be really basic and actually are part of the rituals in my daily life that I enjoy. So starting my morning with a warm glass of lemon water, which sometimes I may add a little bit of cinnamon, known for blood sugar regulation, or cayenne to it. So I mentioned blood sugar regulation. That's sort of the main area I would say I focused on. What are the things that are going to keep my blood sugar as even as possible to avoid insulin spikes at all? We know that blood sugar, spikes in blood sugar and issues with blood sugar is what's correlated not only to cancers, but also diabetes and heart disease, all of the chronic diseases that are so prevalent in our Western society that I'm hoping to avoid. So how do I maintain an even blood sugar throughout the day? So introducing teas, herbal teas was another big one. Dandelion root tea is amazing for detoxification. Nettle tea is incredible for trace minerals. And a daily meditation practice was another piece that really, even our Western literature supports just the profound impact that a meditation practice can have on our health and well-being.
Yay, meditation.
Yeah, you're actually the first person I really met with a strong meditation practice, and it was really inspiring and helped me to make that commitment. Yeah.
It totally transformed my life. I can attest to that. Have you heard what I was going to get back to? Have you heard about these devices that do continuous glucose monitoring?
I've heard of them in the context of that's now sort of the standard when someone's a type 1 diabetic, is that they're wearing this monitor now, which can almost, it may even automatically administer the insulin if you need it. But I don't have one, but just getting even a regular pinprick blood glucose monitor is available on Amazon. It's inexpensive. And it does seem like a really practical way to get some lifetime feedback on how foods are affecting you, because something that we're learning too, that Rob Wolf talks about in his books about paleo eating, is that different people respond very differently to carbohydrates with dramatically different spikes or lack of in their blood sugar. Yeah.
So interesting. Like I've noticed since I don't eat you know, bread hardly at all, or pasta, or like white flour, or even wheat all that much anymore. When I do have bread, it feels like I had a candy bar. Like I literally get high and feel like crap for a while.
And it's so hard if we're eating those things regularly to know and to pinpoint that that's the case. There's a fascinating study that actually shows that people who there's an opiate epidemic happening, but so we have drugs that block opiate receptors in the brain. And we have studies also that show that people whose opiate receptors are blocked will eat far less bread and carbohydrates. So part of the reason
like a dopamine thing, is that what it is?
Yeah. So it does affect sort of the GABA pathway, is my understanding, and the dopamine. But that it's part of this sort of endorphin rush, and part of this is getting high, like you called it.
Yeah.
It's the same pathway in the brain.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So people, I'm trying to understand the implications of that. So people who have, there are drugs that block the opiate receptors. So people who have like an opiate addiction would take these so that they don't get the high, so that they don't want to take opiates anymore. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if people have those receptors blocked, then they also don't go to sugar and carbohydrates to get high as much either.
Yeah, the study I'm talking about was specifically using those to look at carbohydrate intake. Yeah, and did show that people were, somewhat unconsciously, right? But they were just opting to have far fewer carbohydrates.
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems like a really good moment to segue into the effect of nutrition and lifestyle on mental health. I'm not sure how much you've looked into this. I know that I started following Dr. Kelly Brogan because of and it's just awesome. And her thing is helping people get off psychiatric meds using lifestyle and dietary changes.
Yes, absolutely. And it is so refreshing to have a psychiatrist like Dr. Kelly Brogan on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is a sort of a previously fringe and now starting to blossom overlap, the world of nutrition and mental health, where many people, when I mention even my interest in both and the way that they overlap, have even just the basic question of how could that be?
Yeah.
How does that even work? That what I eat impacts my mood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's one of the most basic ways we have to influence how we're feeling. I would say previously the most of the research, like in my holistic nutrition program, when it comes to this overlap, is related to kids. So for example, what we know is that in many countries other than the US, food additives and dyes are not allowed to be put into foods because of the correlation with things like ADHD and behavioral issues.
Uh-huh.
And another area with a lot of research is the autism spectrum disorders and the connection to digestion issues and specifically gluten intolerance. So those areas I think have been looking at the overlap between nutrition and mental health for longer. Mm-hmm. And now what we're starting to see with all of this new research about the microbiome is that there's so much information about the way our microbiome, where actually many of our neurotransmitters are made, and its impact on things like depression and anxiety. And now we're starting to see across the board, even to psychotic realm disorders.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what is she? I don't know if you know the specific like protocols for different kinds of diagnoses or problems, or even just like mood stuff. I know that like probiotics and foods are supposed to have a positive impact on mood. What's your experience with that, or what do you know about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say what we know to be helpful so far when it comes to mental health disorders are, oftentimes coming back to what we know is true about a healthy lifestyle overall. It's just, and we just keep coming back to similar things. One of the main issues, I think, in having a good mood is making sure that you're not getting in your own way by eating things that you're sensitive to or that inflame your system. So, anti-inflammatory diet, I would say, is sort of the touchstone of feeling good. And so those, there's main things to just start and avoid. So like Dr. Kelly Brogan would say, let's just start by clearing out all possible inflammation. And she does that by saying, hey, have a reset where you don't use dairy, gluten, grains.
Soy, eggs are like the main inflammatory.
All the main allergens and inflammatory agents. Let your body repair. Yeah.
One thing I want to add, if anybody's looking for a really basic introduction to, it looks like we just have 10 minutes left on this meeting. I'm going to upgrade. Just kidding. I'm not going to do that right now. So a really good introduction to this information is a book that I read when I was starting to learn all of this, and it's called Anti-Cancer, A New Way of Life. And I actually don't remember who wrote that at the moment.
I've read it at least twice, if not sometimes at your recommendation, and I also can't remember the author right now, but it's a fantastic read.
And it talks all about the environments that you're creating in your is that you? Is there a tapping on your end? Or is there somebody else that's not muted?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
So that's a really good introduction to what foods are inflammatory and anti-inflammatory, and what you can do just to begin to make your body inhospitable to cancer, and by doing that, make yourself less vulnerable to all kinds of other chronic inflammatory diseases. The other thing I wanted to tell you in particular was that our littlest one has had eczema and it's been getting, it kind of ebbs and flows, but it's been worse in the last, year or so. And I finally put it together when we moved into this house, and there's like a mildewy smell in their bedroom, and I got an air filter, and it seems to, in just like 3 days, clearing it up. What can you say about toxins?
Amazing.
I know, it's crazy. We cut out wheat and dairy, and it still was not really responding to it. It wasn't quite ready to cut out like eggs, because we eat a lot of eggs. We have chickens, It's a really good source of a lot of good stuff too.
Yeah, and man, air filters are something that I only discovered with the wildfires that we all went through, and I feel late to that game, just knowing that our indoor air has so many toxins, with or without something specific you can identify, like a mildew exposure. I think it's underappreciated, the amount of toxic load that we're all taking on a daily basis, just simply living our lives. Even one that I consider, where I eat all organic food and I have these daily detoxification practices, through just driving in a car and being out in the world and eating foods, that we're inundated with so many toxins that our predecessors weren't dealing with, and our bodies do not have sort of the evolutionary practice of managing this load of toxins. So it really does take us taking these extra steps, being careful with all the products we're putting in and on our body, what we're breathing.
Yes, we can do a whole other talk about cosmetics and all of the, let's say the toxins, and we'll do this again, and we'll talk all about, get really depressed about all the shit that's in her environment and that we're probably
it's all actionable. Yeah.
Because I think that I actually have to wrap this up pretty soon.
It always goes so quickly talking with you. So much to talk about.
There is, but we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Soon. Okay. And so I'm Melissa Taylor. This is the Optimize for Impact Facebook group, and we talk all about how to be the people that we need to be to make positive changes in the world and be part of the not part of the problem, part of the good change. And I recorded this, I'm going to post it to the group. So if anybody has any questions for Jen, she's on here too, and or me, we're around. Thanks for joining us or listening to the replay, whichever you are, and let's talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.